Buanamuga,
Yes.
using your Samsung Galaxy Tab S8 Ultra with S Pen.
Proceed.
Tell us the proverb for today.
You know, earlier on I said I would not think of a proverb and I would not say it in Creole. I have changed my mind.
This week.
It's a new week.
Okay.
We're in December.
Sawa.
Okay?
Uh-huh.
Now let me read. So that proverb of the milk and the cow, forget it. New proverb. Is there any way it says I cannot quote two proverbs the same day? Is there anywhere? Right.
Uh-huh.
This is a proverb from Sierra Leone. The proverbs this week are from the country of Sierra Leone. Okay. When you raise a leopard, you shouldn't be upset when it eats your goat.
Oh, who's raising leopards?
No, that's the proverb.
When you raise a leopard, you shouldn't be upset when it eats your goat.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, in Creole, pause. I'm going to read slowly so that you do not miss anything. When you men le pet, you no feed vex. I do eat you got. Hey,
Why do you say?
I'm
Why
reading.
did you say leopard? Leopard differently. Why is it different?
According to Creole,
leopard.
it's written leopard. Leopard in Creole is leopard. Please, I'm reading in Creole. Let me read it again. Your Excellency, I'm reading in Creole. Okay. You men, leopard. Okay, I think you've gotten the general idea. Let's go on.
That is not what you said before.
So what? Is it not okay to hear new things every time I speak? Okay, let's proceed, folks.
Whoa.
Right.
Will you men?
Yes, Samsung Galaxy Tab S8 Ultra.
That's too much clarity from that device.
Let's proceed.
Too much clarity. Wow. Our guest this morning is the ambassador of Denmark to Kenya, His Excellency Ole Thonke. Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you so much.
It's good to have you on the show. We you men le pen.
That's a good way to start
I know.
a conversation.
Don't be vexed. Karibu sana balozi.
Yes.
So the Danes are, before you came, we had actually talked about, how we're going to welcome you here. And we were looking at your picture and we thought, this guy looks like the son of Ragnar Lothbrok.
I have never heard that before. But I guess I have to say thank you. Yeah.
You're a descendant of the great Viking.
Thank you. but we are Danes. We are descendants
Yes,
of
you
Vikings.
are.
Yeah. We're way from up north, and we kind of ruled the world 1,000 years ago. And since then, it went downhill little by little. Yeah.
And you just gave up on becoming conquerors.
Yes.
You became peacemakers.
Exactly. That's what
Right.
happened.
So what changed that? What is it that made the Vikings change from being conquerors to being kingmakers?
I think
did it just happen?
No, yeah, they definitely started as conquered, and I'm not sure they were as nice as you would like your neighbors to be. But little by little they settled into to trade more and more, and from there on it just developed, and now we thrive off trading with the rest of the world. So yeah.
The other one is a question that is, of course, you've been asked this question very many times in your stay here in Kenya. Is Ole a name?
Indeed.
Or is it
Is it a short form of another name?
of another name?
No, Ole is a name.
Ole is a name.
Ole is a name.
A
It's
full name.
Yes,
So your name is Ole Thonke.
Thonke.
What does Ole mean?
But that's the very, very interesting thing. It means son of or relative to in Nordic.
Okay.
Maasais and Vikings.
Yes, have similarities.
Very similar.
Imagine.
Yes, they do.
Or Vikings are Maasais.
These guys are Maasai.
Masai from Copenhagen.
Yes. So our man Olekina
Yes.
is also Dane. Or Olelenko.
Isn't it amazing about names and similarities as well?
It is. It is. Means son of or a relative of.
Many languages with that.
All right. How long have you been in Kenya, Balozi?
I actually started my I don't know what I should call it affair with Kenya in 1997 when I was a young student. At that time, I applied to become an intern at Danish embassies all over the world, and by chance, I ended up in Nairobi. Well, that's 25 years ago now. But I still remember coming with Kenya Airways direct from Copenhagen. That was when you had direct flights. Going through town, picked up by a colleague from the embassy, and she drove me straight to the YMCA downtown, just across Nairobi University.
Yep.
And that was my first time in Africa. And I remember walking into the YMCA. Everybody was so nice and welcoming, and I was shown my small little room. Door was closed, and there I was, and I was thinking, what the hell am I doing here? It's like, it was pretty far away from Denmark for me at that time, yeah. But then I mean, soon after, I just started loving it.
Okay. So what were you doing as an intern at the embassy?
Oh, as an intern at an embassy, you're like the lowest and the newest, but also the one that gets a chance to do everything. So I did everything from copying. I sent at that time the first official email from the Danish embassy in Nairobi back to Copenhagen. That it was just invented, and me as a young person, of course, it was my job to introduce that technology.
And they expected you to know how to send an email.
Exactly. I had no clue, but I figured out.
Are you sure it went to the right recipient?
And I have no idea. We never got a reply.
Oh. That says a lot. How long was your internship then?
Half a year. Mm-hmm. Half a year I spent here, and it was an amazing half year. It was the election year in '97.
Yep.
And staying at the YMCA, there was a lot of African students coming in and out of YMCA because Nairobi University was just next door. And there was a lot of protesters against the current regime at that time. And they were planning demonstrations and riots, etc. At the YMCA, they used that as
that was the base,
a get together kind of, once in a while. So it really affected me and how I saw Kenya, young Africans, etc. And I even got caught in some of the riots. One time I got actually, they were throwing stones at everything.
Yeah.
And I was coming home from. I've been to town. My brother was visiting me, and we were at the Florida, where everybody went at that time. Coming back in a taxi, and then we ended up in riots, and they were just stoning the car. So a stone went through the front window and hit me in my forehead on the back seat of the car.
And that was it.
Yeah.
The embassy said this guy back home.
No, they didn't. They said send that guy to the hospital, and so I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next time you came to Kenya, now I'm assuming is when you now have come as an ambassador.
No, I was back and forth. Because then I got a job at Foreign Affairs, and I was dealing with East Africa at that time, mostly Uganda. But whenever I had the chance, I got back to Kenya once in a while. But then in 2009, I came back as the deputy at the embassy. with my family at that time. So we spent 4 amazing years traveling all around Kenya and doing all sorts of amazing things and witnessing the new constitution you have in Kenya, etc., etc. So spent 4 amazing years at that time.
And then your current tour of duty.
Yeah.
Now as the official ambassador.
Yeah, and then I was so fortunate I had the chance to be sent back as ambassador. Yeah, so that's my journey of Kenya.
Okay. So you know quite a bit then about this country and about the relations between Kenya and Denmark. Now we've been celebrating and commemorating the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, and we've been looking at various angles to gender-based violence, to commitments that we have made as a country towards eliminating gender-based violence. And a commitment made by the former president was 2020?
By 2026, there should have been an end to gender-based violence in Kenya. Tall order, but if anything, then shows hopefully the kind of commitment and importance that it's placed on removing or eliminating violence against any gender and at whatever age. So even as we come to the end of this celebration, and tomorrow marks the end of that, it'd be interesting to hear then what your thoughts are and what you've seen on your tour of duty here, but at the same time, coming to Kenya 25 years ago and then seeing the progression of, this particular thing, and then saying, okay, in the next 4 years, will it be possible to bring an end to this? And what are the gains that have been made?
I think that there has been made tremendous gains. I mean, Kenya is a completely different place when it comes to gender-based violence now than 25 years ago. I think if you look at the new constitution from 2010, if you look at the legislation in place, the awareness in the population, let alone the fact that you have a president that says we want to end this by 2026, it's a huge change from 25 years ago. So I think, Kenya should really be commended for pushing the agenda a lot. But on the other hand, the challenge is still there. There are so many Kenyan women who still experience gender-based violence on a daily basis. It's close to half of Kenyan women will experience gender-based violence during their lifetime. So ending that in 4 years' time, as you said, that's a tall order. I think it's impossible to completely eliminate. We have that in Denmark as well. We have men beating up women as well. So it's not a thing you can completely eliminate as such. But of course, you can push it and you can make sure that the laws are in place. You can ensure that justice is being served. And that the perpetrators they get a punishment whenever it happens. So I think that's also an important part of this equation.
What would you say, Your Excellency, is the thinking and the guiding principle behind the international relationship that Denmark has with other countries, specifically in Africa?
I think it's a thinking of equal partnerships, of friendly relations. Denmark. We've been here in Kenya since independence.
Yes.
We've been. Traditionally we've had a lot of development assistance. Now we're moving more and more into trade. We exchange a lot of technical know-how on wind technology, etc., etc. So I think it's a very fruitful relation where both Kenya and Denmark benefits.
The reason why I asked the question is because the one name that is, I think, associated with your country is Danida.
Yeah.
Everyone who is in the development world knows and hears of Danida and what Danida has done. And why I ask about the thinking behind it is because the thinking then would give us an understanding of why it is, or the focus that Denmark has with it, the focus it has with regards to develop the development agenda. Now, an agenda that I think your country has also participated in a great deal is the human rights agenda. Yes. Now, how then do you tie the two, development and human rights?
I think they go hand in hand. I think if you look at any country, the more developed a country is, the more educated your population is, the more human rights flourish. And for us, I mean, we come from a small liberal country with a very strong set of values on human rights and democracy, and for us it's I mean, completely in alignment with everything that we have in the UN Charter that the whole world agreed upon, and that's what we're trying to live in. And for us, I mean, we, in terms of development assistance, and Danida, as you say, it's very, everybody knows Danida in Kenya, and if you go to the countryside, you'll find a lot of children with the name of Danida, for instance. But it's I mean, we are one of the richest countries in the world, and we feel a moral obligation to share that. We think it's only fair. And we have done that. We are one of the few countries in the world who gives away 0.7% of our GDP in development assistance at a global level. So it's part of who we are and what we believe in. And then, I mean, yeah.
If you look at the kind of, as we're talking about this, days of activism against GBV, and then ahead of tomorrow, the World Human Rights Day. And just back of what City is asking about Danida and the programs that Danida has been involved in Kenya, when it comes to human rights, what kind of impact would you say has Danida and the government of Denmark contributed towards the entrenchment and realization of human rights in Kenya?
I mean, that's the challenge with having a lot of activities in human rights and governance is that it's very difficult to put your finger and say this is exactly the result, because it's all a process, it's all a dialogue. I mean, we've been supporting civil society, which we think is part of any society, and plays also in Denmark a constructive role in moving forward. We've been supporting private sector. We've been supporting legal organizations throughout the years in Kenya. And creating that dialogue, I think, has moved quite a lot of things forward. We were very active also in the making of the new constitution, not by saying what was in it, but supporting Kenyans to engage actively in it, and having legal experts coming with suggestions, inspiration, recommendations, etc., etc. And again, I think it's a lot what we do together, because we don't do it alone, and Denmark will never come and tell Kenya you should do this or you should do that. But like a good example is the conference on population and development in 2019 that Denmark and Kenya co-hosted with the UN. There was a joint thing that we did together with the government of Kenya at that time. Again, putting gender-based violence and human rights for women on the agenda. So it's something that we do together. It's not Denmark coming and telling Kenya how you should develop your country at all.
Why does that work? Why does that method work? Because the opposite is true of other development partners, whereby it is, sure, we will offer our assistance, but then it's what
prescriptive.
Many want. Exactly. It's prescriptive, and in some cases also would be probably seen as patronizing. Why does the model that Denmark uses, why does that work? Because here we are also talking about human rights, we're talking about gender-based violence, etc., etc. we've seen situations before from development partners where it's, look, we will hold your hand, but at the same time, make sure you get your human rights record in order. Make sure you do 1, 2, 3, and this is how we want you to do it. Why does the opposite work for Denmark?
I think the answer is very easy. What I've seen throughout my career is that when you try to put or impose what you think others should do, and they don't really believe it, they will not do it. I mean, it's for me that's very simple. We can come up with 10 conditions to something, but if the other part, they might say yes, that's right, and we'll do it. But when when push comes to shove, they will not. If you don't believe it, if you don't agree that this should be done, you won't do it. I mean that's what I've seen over and over again, and you can use that for everything. Whether you do job creation together with a country, or you do human rights, or you do more trade, etc., etc. I mean you can't. And maybe I don't know, because Denmark is a small country and we are a lightweight in the world compared to other countries. So also we don't have the weight to impose on others what we think. So maybe we just have that approach. It comes natural for us.
Mm-hmm. It's 7:30, so let's take a break and then continue the conversation.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
We are hosting Ambassador Ole Thonke, Denmark's ambassador to Kenya, and we are talking about very many things. Balozi, you've just told us, you're one of the wealthiest countries in the world, 0.7% of your GDP. You've basically dedicated it to giving back to other parts of the world. Now, there's been a lot of controversy and, just debate on the kind of aid that comes from the developed world to African countries, and whether that aid comes as a form of control. Because then you see, when you and your colleagues call a press conference and say, you know what, we would like to encourage the Kenyan government to do this and the other, you're basically not encouraging the Kenyan government to do this and the other. The news today is that there's speculation. The reason why Raila Odinga called off his planned Jamhuri Day rally was because he received some encouragement from the international community. And it comes from the power. Well, we don't know whether that's for sure. It's just the speculation. But we've seen instances and incidences where, let's say ambassadors from the European Union call a press conference and they say, we would like to encourage this and the other of the country. We'd like to call upon. It's basically not just calling upon, but it's using the leverage of the aid that you give. Is that a fair judgment or fair accusation?
I don't see it that way. For Denmark, we have a partnership with Kenya that we signed with the government. We completely agree on all the areas where we work and the development assistance that we provide. I believe it's a win-win for both countries. I don't see us imposing or dictating what Kenyan government or Kenyan leaders should do or should not do. That's not how we work. I don't agree with it.
You see, the question I'd asked earlier on regarding the policies that you have, we do understand that policies differ, and we do understand that countries like Denmark didn't participate in the colonization of Africa. We know that. So you don't have a colonial history. Now, when we look at development purely from an economical perspective, the reality is most of the assistance that we are given are not as free as it is stated. There's usually a little twist to it, meaning if, for instance, someone gives me development aid and they say they're going to help, say, Kenya build a factory, whatever the country, whatever is brought in to help put up that factory will come from the country that's giving the help. Now, what it therefore means is that moving forward, everything that has to do with the repairs, the maintenance, will have to come from the country that gave the aid. I actually consider it to be fair because it makes sense. It's a quid pro quo. What my friend and colleague Eric was actually bringing to the fore is that honest conversation is not always there. It is presented as though it is a gift that has absolutely no ties, and that is not entirely the truth. There's absolutely nothing wrong with there being ties. After all, there is nothing for free on this particular planet. There's always something attached to it. But more significantly, when you look at what you said regarding looking at what the people you are partnering with consider to be important and providing assistance on what they consider to be important, not what you feel they think is important. Now, again, it's an ongoing debate, and what muddies these waters, and we're going to get there at some point, is the discussion that has gripped the world with regards to the environment. Since the problems that we've had in Russia, when Russia attacked Ukraine, all sorts of economic issues have risen. Now, among the things that has happened, activities that were directly related to the environment and the degradation of it have come to the fore. And that's what Eric mentioned, the issue of coal. The Germans are having a serious conversation about it. Other countries, not just, when I say having a conversation, I'm being polite. They are going back to the usage of coal. And yet we say, but we have coal deposits and we are being told categorically you cannot exploit it. Now, it's those conversations that we find in an imbalance in. Yes. That is the background from which we are speaking. Yes.
But and I mean, that I get. I mean, the world is interdependent, and just going a bit back to what you say, when huge investors like Apple invest in Denmark,
Yes.
they also have a say in where their factory or
Yes,
their
they
data
do.
plant should be,
Yes, they do.
etc. So I mean that goes on all over the world. So that I very much agree on. I think if you look at the issue of environment and uses of coal, for instance, I mean the huge challenge right now is that with the problem of that we don't have enough energy and gas in Europe, is that you cannot change your energy system from one day to another. And they are looking in Europe, and it's pretty serious. Even in Denmark, the energy prices have exploded in Denmark, and we are seeing things that we haven't seen, at least in my lifetime in Denmark, in terms of that. They are talking about that they have to shut down parts of the electricity net in countries in Europe. So they are really stretching it and trying to find any solution possible in the short run to curb with this problem, including, as you're saying, reintroducing coal in some places out of bare necessity. Then I do understand it sounds odd that other countries then preach to African countries that you cannot touch your coal, for instance. So I mean, if you can flip it around and say, we have a world today where the price of producing energy using renewable sources is actually on par with fossil fuel. And we have experienced that in Denmark. We've developed our renewable energy sector the last 30, 40 years. The first 20, 30 years, it was much more expensive than if we had used gas or coal in Denmark. And the Danish consumers, they paid a much higher price for the electricity than they should have, because we started to introduce more and more wind power, for instance. But nowadays, we can actually produce electricity from wind at the same price as we can with fossil fuels in Denmark, and sometimes even cheaper. So the big challenge is how to integrate it into the grid, etc., etc. But the fact is that today and the trend is that renewable energy is becoming more and more cheap, and that is the technology of the future. Everybody expects that in 10, 15 years' time, no one would ever invest in anything related to coal or oil or anything, because renewable energy technology has overtaken it. And everybody will drive in electric cars because it's less expensive as such. And if you look at a country like Kenya, when we talk about renewable energy, I mean, Kenya has an abundance of geothermal. You have wind, you have sun, and you have hydro. You have all the renewable energy sources available in the world in abundance. And you can look at your coal as a natural resource and something you want to exploit. But you can equally look at your wind or your sun or your hydro or your geothermal as a natural resource that you should exploit. So it is a choice. What do you want to exploit? It's not a bigger resource than the other. In my head, it's just it's a traditional way of thinking that we have this gold, we'll dig it out and we'll sell it, and we don't have to import. But it's just a matter of how you think about it. I mean, but again, it's the choice of Kenya. But I think the Kenyan government has said that they want to go 100% renewable. They have taken that choice, and I think it's a wise choice in terms of how the technology is developing, because a country has to follow the technology also and see the opportunities that are there instead.
Well said.
The big challenge will come with, and we talk about this a number of times on the show, is on technology itself. So the technology that is used to tap these natural resources, the renewable, the technology that's used to actually get our geothermal off the ground in Olkaria, the technology that's used to tap the wind in Turkana, or to tap the solar currently in Garissa, all that technology is owned by somebody else. And this somebody else is in the developed world, who had other sources of energy that he used to experiment and develop this new technology. And now when we're talking about, all right, so let's move into this renewable energy technology, it's still expensive for us to start off. Now, in the balance of things, now that you're very good at talking about human rights and rights, should it be much easier if the developed world were, for example, to say, as our way of compensating for the effect that we've had with our dirty sources of energy, we are going to make this new technology of going green much cheaper and subsidized or even free, so then the developing world can easily access that. So if we had, for example, very cheap ways of getting wind turbines, would actually be having more wind turbines in not only Loyangalani but other parts of the country, or solar panels, or we'd be able to tap more into our geothermal sources. Would that be a better balance, in your opinion?
But I think to a large extent that's what's happening. I mean, but you have to separate it. I mean, part of the it's a private market. It's demand and supply, and things have a cost. But with, for instance, with our development assistance, we are transferring technology in how to manage a grid, an electricity grid, with a lot of variable renewable energy, as they say, into the grid. It's a technology that we have developed in Denmark for decades. Again, because we have more than 50% of our electricity coming from wind power, which goes up and down. But still we have a super stable grid. So we have developed that technology for the last 20 years. And we have a partnership with the Ministry of Energy here, where we have experts coming from the Ministry of Energy in Denmark, sharing exactly that technology with the Ministry of Energy in Kenya, as part of our development assistance. And I mean, in the geothermal, there's a lot of Kenyan engineers and businessmen and investors who are very much involved in geothermal, and I think Kenya really owns that technology little by little. Of course, you don't from one day to another learn how to how to manage it. But I think Kenya is pretty far in terms of know-how and technology in geothermal. I mean, I've been up visiting the center there, and it's pretty impressive what Kenya has managed there. Of course, with some of it is through foreign investors, but a lot of it is through government investments as well.
But who owns the technology?
Yes.
Technology.
You see, go ahead, Excellency.
But the technology is owned by the investors, and again, some of it is invested by Kenyan government, and some of it is
true.
by private investors. So it's owned by, I mean, the private investors, they own the plant that they have invested in and set up as such. Yeah.
You see, using the word partnership and thinking about how it is the role of partnerships can actually play into even whether it's economic, whether it's industrialization, or whatever business aspects. I look at the training component, the transfer of skills component, the investment in it by the donor country. I can give examples of countries who partner with Kenya. The one I think of off the top of my head is Japan. Okay, there's a university we call JKUR. Many people don't know that the Japanese actually built that university from the ground up. All of it. The master plan for Nairobi, the master plan for Mombasa, and the Freeport that we're talking about, all that came with JICA, the Japanese Overseas Investment Agency. I'm simply saying, when you look at that and you look at the openings that particular country has had with education, now that's technology, information, know-how transfer. When you open up people to study and work in some of these industries, when they come back, they actually do have the know-how that we're speaking of. Now, it's in this regard and against this background that I ask. For instance, I am aware of what the Danish government has done over the years. Now, if I may ask, in the education sector, yes, how much has the government of Denmark done to ensure that a lot of this knowledge, a lot of the specific and specialized capacities that they have is transferred to Kenyans through the education system? As in, how many scholarships does Denmark offer in the course of a year?
We have actually, as part of that more technical collaboration on electricity, but we have a similar technical collaboration on waste management, which is also an issue in Kenya. We have the same technical collaboration in food safety in Kenya, making sure that what you buy in the supermarkets, you don't get sick from it. So as part of that, we have had, I think, almost 1,000 Kenyans in Denmark on specialized courses, either at university or special training courses, but also going out visiting Danish industries or companies, universities, etc., in order to learn and to understand those different technologies. So it's an integrated part of how we work. Also, we don't have Denmark. We don't have an education program as such here in Kenya. We have had that in other countries, but not here in Kenya.
Why?
It's all a matter of priorities. We've had it in where I was in Bolivia, for instance, where they had a huge challenge with the education system. I think the education system of Kenya. It's oftentimes also a matter of where are the resources, where are the biggest needs, and it's a political choice. What do you do in which countries in together with? I mean, when you have a dialogue with the country. So we haven't had that, but we've had these technical collaborations.
I understand perfectly. You see, the reason why I asked this question is when I look at, again, I am on this matter of partnerships. It's a question of you have something, it's in existence, but then how do you enhance it? Take the view that the perspective I'm presenting here is a Kenyan telling you what Kenyans would like, would need, how they would view it. Because once you have a collaboration that extends to the field of education, in my mind, there's nothing that has greater effects than that. In my mind, it is long-lasting. It's something that you never really run away from. It's continuous.
It is. But I mean, like we've had a long-standing collaboration in agriculture because Denmark, we are an agricultural society, just like Kenya. A huge part of that is training and learning farmers and new techniques, know-how, etc. So I mean, a part of all these different programs, training is a huge part of it. So I mean, it's the same on when we do climate change programs. Again, training is a huge part of it. Adapting to new technologies.
Okay.
What do you think the future looks like? I mean, just from what you've been able to see, the different countries that you've gone to, and looking at the experience with Kenya today, one of the big issues that we continuously see is that at the negotiating table, I don't know what happens. At the negotiating table, we seem to often, not just Kenya, other countries, seem to get the short end of the stick. Do you think that that's, from where you sit, is that a problem from the negotiators or from a pre-conditioned model of how the outcome is designed to be? That will we see a situation at some point where Kenya and other countries do not have to be on the receiving end of this partnership, but actually can be those who set the pace?
I really don't see Kenya as on the receiving end of the partnerships as such. At least that's not my experience. When we talk to different ministries here in Kenya, I believe that international collaboration, whether it's development cooperation or if it's trade or if it's investment, I do believe it's a win-win for both countries. Denmark, we have no wish absolutely whatsoever to come and exploit Kenya or tell Kenya what to do or not to do. That's not how it is. I believe that it's a win-win for both countries. I think it's a win-win when Danish companies invest in a juice factory in Kenya and introduce new technology on how to do that, creating also jobs for Kenyans. Again, for me, it's a win-win situation.
Something that perhaps you might tell these juice-making companies that come from Denmark, people don't know about them. You see, if people don't know, it might as well not exist. Denmark is like a silent partner. One, they're there, but you hear of them, but you never really quite see them. What I'm saying is, you will suffer the backlash of a perception that people have. It may have no bearing whatsoever in reality, but it's a perception. So, if they could speak a little louder, a little more about the things that you do, these delightful companies and organizations, tell them to talk about it. Let people know that this is what they do and they come from Denmark and this is how Denmark is helping. It helps because then people know, so
this is the one.
Denmark.
Ambassador, we thank you very much for joining us today. Right, and as your closing remarks, maybe what is it that Kenya can actually export to Denmark, in addition to what we're currently exporting?
I think for me, I think a great example of what Kenya can do is we have a lot of imports of coffee to Denmark. Before days, we used to import the green beans, roast it and pack it in Denmark or in Europe, and where all the value addition and all the jobs were created. Now they have established a new factory here in Nairobi that actually import coffee from all over East Africa. They roast it and package it, make sure that the value addition is done here in Kenya and the jobs are created here in Kenya, and then they send it off to Denmark, to the supermarkets, shelf ready, like that. So I think Kenya can offer a lot on that, and definitely will develop in that direction.
Great. Ambassador Ole Thonke is Denmark's ambassador to Kenya. He's Kenya's guest. Thank you very much for joining us today, and hope to have you again soon.
Thank you very much for an interesting discussion.